What's up, guys? So today I'm going to do a response to Derek from Derek's Horror Corner. And check out his channel if you haven't, but a good friend of mine who recommended me to do this list that he was recommended from somebody else for top 10 worst horror franchises. Now, in this ranking for me, this primarily will be depending on more if I think the movies are boring or if I think that they're just forgettable. Like, not as like a, oh, this movie's bad because blah 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 reasons for like film reasons. Like, not because, oh, the acting's bad or whatever. I think I'm gonna do this more on entertainment value, or if it's just not very interesting at all, pretty boring. So I'm going to start out with my worst franchises with my number 10, which will be the Jaws franchise. Now, of course, the original is a classic. There's no doubt about that. But Jaws 2, I think, is not terrible. It's not great. It's just all right. But so that's the only other one I think out of the films that is understandably all right as a movie. And then Jaws 3 is awful, but it is hilarious. I do love Jaws 3 because it is so funny, so stupid. This Jaws in SeaWorld is just such a ridiculous idea, but I loved every minute of that horrible movie. So, but then we get Jaws the Revenge, which is bad in a way where I didn't hate it, but I thought this is one of the worst, like, sequels ever. Like, it is terrible. Like the shark, the third or the fourth shark, like every time in these movies there's a new shark because they die in every movie. The fourth shark has a vendetta against the Brodies, and literally the mother literally has a psychic connection with the shark where, like, she will, like, if the shark's near her at the ocean, she will bolt up, look around, like she knows it's here. And the shark swam from New York to the Bahamas in like a day. And it's so stupid. It's so dumb. It almost makes me think it's funny, but like the movie itself is just so boring. Like, Jaws the Revenge is really boring. Jaws 3 is at least fun bad. This one is boring bad. So I feel like Jaws 2 and Jaws 4 are really boring. 3 is bad, but it's entertaining. But I feel like that's why it's my number 10, because, yeah, it's a lot of bad sequels. But at least 3 is interestingly bad for me, and, like, 2 is just a serviceable sequel. It doesn't need to exist, but it's serviceable. But it's not, it's just boring to me. Like, again, being bored in these types of movies is the reason why they're some of these are the worst, in my opinion, of film franchises. And my number 9 would be the Puppet Master franchise. Now, I love the third one so much. I think that the third one is a really underrated horror movie. I think it's great. I think you care for those characters. I think that the kills are great. I think that in most of these movies, the kills are great, but they vary between, like, terrible and, like, serviceable bad cheesiness. The first one I enjoy, the first two I enjoy for what they are, but they're pretty bad still. Like, and boring. The idea of the psychics was something I never cared about. They're really boring. The first two movies. Love the third one. The fourth and fifth one I think are cool. Those are some of the better ones out of all the films. And then Curse of the Puppet Master is really bad, but it's somewhat watchable. And then, like, Retro Puppet Master and The Legacy are really bad. The Legacy is one of the worst movies I have ever seen, because literally it is not a movie. It's literally 10 minutes of these two characters with really bad performances coming into this movie while showing clips from every other Puppet Master movie, and it's only an hour and 9 minutes long. This movie is literally an hour-long cut of, like, the other films before this. That is one of the most shittiest sequels ever. I really don't get that. That is so bad. I just don't understand that at all. It is so bad. And, like, the Axis movies, like, I liked Axis of Evil. I couldn't stand Axis Rising or Axis Termination. I thought they were god-awful, and I thought that the newest Puppet Master, The Littlest Reich, is actually a really good sequel. So I've got like 3 or 4 movies in this franchise out of like 10 or 11, or I think 12, that I really don't like that much. Like, some of them are watchable, some of them are really incredibly boring. So that's why it's my number 9. And my number 8 would be Phantasm. Now, Phantasm, the franchise, I really enjoy the first 2, and the third one I enjoy too, but less so than the first 2. And the fourth one I think is really dreadfully dull and really boring, and the fifth one is awful, like with the horrible special effects, some of the worst special effects I've ever seen in any of these kinds of movies. And Phantasm Ravager, the fifth one, is awful, and that movie just really reeks of like so incredibly low budget with terrible special effects, and the performances are all right, but it's just really terrible. So I feel like 4 and 5 really make it to where Phantasm is one of those franchises where I really do enjoy a couple of them, but then the other half are terrible. Or not terrible, really just unwatchable. Boring, I guess you could say. Not terrible, but yeah. The Phantasm franchise is my number 7, or my number 8, sorry. And my number 7 would be the Hellraiser franchise. Now, this is an interesting franchise because whether you like or dislike any of these movies after the first one or the first 2, I think that these movies are creative and inventive. I think that even though they are obviously, a lot of these sequels are obviously like, let's do an existing script and put Pinhead in it. And he's only in it for like 2 minutes in most of these sequels. So that's why a lot of them are terrible in that aspect, but they're not all terrible movies. I think that they all have benefits for me. I think that a lot of them like are actually really entertaining and interesting despite being about a movie about Pinhead, even though he's not really important in a lot of these sequels. So I really did like a lot of these ones, even if they're terrible. Like Inferno, I really enjoyed because Inferno was a cool cop story, even though it was set in the Hellraiser universe and Pinhead isn't in it much, and it's got some cool graphic imagery in it. And Scott Derrickson directed it in Hellraiser and Inferno, funny enough, but it just is interesting in how these sequels, after the first 2, I love the first one. The second one I think is good, but it's not as good at all like the first one. It's still a solid sequel. The third one is really silly and dumb, but it's one of the better, more watchable ones. And the fourth one, In Space, is really dumb. Fifth one I liked a lot. And then I'm blanking on the other sequels on how they range. Like, hold on, I've got it right down here. After Hellraiser 3, Bloodline, the space one is pretty bad. Inferno I enjoyed. Hellseeker I thought was interesting because it brought back Christy, but it was still really bad. Or Kirsty. And then Hellraiser Deader I thought was terrible, besides like a couple instances of, like, a couple brief instances of cool scenes, but it was for the most part, really bad. And then Hellraiser Hellworld, I actually enjoyed. Funny enough, a lot of people hate that movie, but I enjoyed that one. And then, like, Revelations is one of the worst sequels I have ever seen. Hellraiser Revelations is literally atrocious. Like, it is one of the worst movies I have ever seen in my life, and I never want to say that for anything. I don't want to say this is one of the worst I've ever seen. It is. Hellraiser Revelations is fucking atrocious. It just literally is. It's filmed on a camera that is like, it looked like a $20 Walmart camera. Pinhead is barely in it, and when he's in it, he's played by this other guy who looks nothing like Pinhead and looks really stupid. And these characters are unlikable and stupid, and the acting is terrible. It is a terrible, incredibly low-budget movie. Like, they literally made it in, like, a month, and they made the script in, like, a day or something, or a week. Like, they wanted to make this churned out before Dimension took the rights away. So that's why Revelations is one of the worst sequels I have ever seen. And then Judgment I thought was alright, like the last one that came out. I thought that was just okay. It was serviceable. So what I'm saying is that I do have a couple sequels I do enjoy, especially 2 and Hellworld and Inferno. but there are a lot of god-awful ones, or just ones that are not good, like Deader's not good. I really hate Revelations. One of the worst, again, one of the worst sequels I've ever seen in my life. Like, it is so insulting. And I'm not even a giant Hellraiser fan, but it is insulting. So the Hellraiser franchise is my number 7, and I just cannot stand, like, a couple of those sequels, but there are some I like or love. So I don't know. It's a weird franchise, but because Revelations is on there, it deserves to be on this list. Because fuck that movie. So bad. And then my number 6 would be the Hannibal franchise, the Hannibal movies. We've got Silence of the Lambs, which is incredible, one of the best horror movies ever. And then we've got Manhunter, which is really underrated and a great movie, I think, but it came out before Silence of the Lambs. And Red Dragon I like a lot too. But then you get Hannibal, the sequel to Silence of the Lambs, that has Julianne Moore instead of Jodie Foster as Clarice, and it is just so boring and so mind-numbingly, like, what is the point of this movie? It is just so weird and so strange that it doesn't make any sense. So Hannibal is really weird. Like, I don't think it's the worst sequel ever, but it's pretty weird. And then we have Hannibal Rising, which is bad too, but, like, I don't know, like, it's not memorable, but it's not, like, awful. It's just, I don't know, it's really inept. Like, it's an inept prequel to the Hannibal films. Like, it's really weird. Hannibal Rising is really strange. So, even though we got a fantastic movie in this franchise and 2 good other sequels, like, I think that the other 2 drag it down. Like, Hannibal is just so unnecessary of a movie, and then Hannibal Rising is so unnecessary too, but worse. Like, it's really bad. Hannibal's just boring. Hannibal Rising is just really bad. So it's a weird toss-up between these 2 bad movies, but they really do knock down the integrity of, like, this, and the respect of, like, this franchise, I think. So that's why Hannibal, the franchise, is my number 6. And my number 5 would be the Wrong Turn franchise. Now, I really like the first one. I actually like the second one and the third one. I think 4, 5, and 6 are really bad. I think 6 is watchably bad, but 4 and 5 are kind of, like, literally, like, really, really hard to watch. I think that they are just really badly acted. The sequels, the direct-to-video sequels, 4, 5, and 6 especially, where, yeah, the kills are cool, but, like, there's nothing with these characters, there's nothing with these performances or acting that, like, yeah, and this is a horror sequel franchise, and I'm saying that about acting and stuff, but yeah, there's some sequels that have better acting in other franchises. These characters are just so stupid and boring in the Wrong Turn sequels, like 4, 5, and 6, so it's just like, and you can argue in 2 and 3 they are too, but I enjoyed them more than 4, 5, and 6. 4, 5, and 6 I think are terrible, but 6 is at least terrible but watchable, because 6 has this weird ass, like, group of people who come in to take this guy who comes in with a group, and, like, they're like his ancestors or something, and, like, they want him to like be inbred with them and have sex with them. It's so weird, it's so stupid, but it's more watchable than most. But 6 is still as bad as 4 and 5, but it's just more watchable because how bad it is. But still, 4, 5, and 6 dragged this franchise down for me, so I think that's why this is lower on my, closer to the bottom on my list. So the Wrong Turn franchise is a lot of just unnecessary sequels. A couple of them I like, 2 and 3, but after that, no, I don't really like them. Even though 6 is kind of funny, bad, but I don't know. And then my number 4, a lot of people argue with me about my number 4, and I'm not saying that you should agree with me, but I think the Predator sequels, I like the Predator, but Predator 2 and Predators I thought were just so unnecessary to the point where, yeah, they're not terrible sequels, but they're just so, for me personally, unnecessary, because I'm not a giant fan of the Predator franchise. Like, I like the first one a lot. I think the first one's great. I like the Predator afterwards, but the Predator 2 and Predators were just so in my opinion, unnecessary because, like I said, I don't love this franchise. I don't care about all the characters of the sequels. So this is why it's really low on my list, because the Predator franchise I just don't care about. Like, I don't, if I, like, I really don't care about anything about these sequels. So that's why Predator is my number 4 in terms of the worst franchise is. And my number 3 would be the Poltergeist franchise. Now, the Poltergeist movies, Poltergeist 2 is the best sequel, but it's still incredibly boring and incredibly almost unwatchable in my opinion. And I hate to say that because a lot of people would say, "Oh, you're just saying that it's unwatchable just to say it." And I'm like, I guess, but I could barely make it through that, and I can watch many slow burn movies, but like that just is so just tedious to get through. And Poltergeist 3 is bad, but it's more watchable, but still it's really bad. And then Poltergeist 2015, the remake, was a perfect example of a boring, just lifeless remake that literally does everything wrong with what made the first one great. Like, the remake has not bad CGI, but it has just CGI instead of like all these cool effects, practical effects. The performances are just okay in the remake. Sam Rockwell I like in the remake, but I like Sam Rockwell in anything. But the remake of the Poltergeist was just so unnecessary and so... I mean, like most remakes, people would say they're unnecessary, but I felt like this was one of the most unnecessary. And I felt like these sequels were some of the most unnecessary sequels out of any franchise, like the Predator franchise. At least the Wrong Turns were direct-to-video. Like, these went to theaters, all of these. All the Predators and all the Poltergeist sequels went to theaters, so think about that. And then my number 2, this is a franchise where usually it's a so bad it's good from a lot of people, and I can totally understand that, but for me, I really don't like the Leprechaun franchise. The first one is entertainingly bad at best, and then all the other sequels are just a mishmash of randomness that is so weird and so strange that, like, I don't know, like, I don't even know what to say about these films. Like, everyone says they're awful, and I guess I could agree with that, but I think that, I mean, they're at least inventive in some ways. Like, the way, like, what they do in each film is different, but it's like, it's just so trying to be self-aware, where I felt like it just ruined it. Like, all these sequels, and even the first one kind of did that too, where it's just kind of ruined it, where it's like, it's so self-aware of how this Leprechaun knows, like he does self-aware things with the camera, and like, it's really silly. And even though the first one is the best one, even though it's pretty bad, the other sequels to me just really are just nothing. Like, they're nothing sequels. And Leprechaun 4 in Space is one of the worst horror sequels I've ever seen. I didn't know what the fuck I was watching the whole time. So bad. Honestly, I really didn't mind the Leprechaun Origin movie, the last one that came out, whatever that was called. Is it just called Leprechaun Origins? What was that called again? The last Leprechaun movie in 2014. It might have been just called Leprechaun Origins, but I thought that at least tried to be serious, so I thought that was less annoying and less stupid than the rest of the sequels, but it was still a bad movie. But that's what the Leprechaun franchise is my number 2. And my number 1, this is one that I feel like people either love or hate, and I feel like a hypocrite because, like these other franchises, like Friday the 13th, the franchise that I love, every movie is the same. But in the Paranormal Activity franchise, which is my number 1 worst, it feels like, to me, it's just not the right entertaining for me. Like I said, with movies like Friday the 13th, every one of them are basically the same. Jason goes out and kills people. In the Paranormal Activity movies, every movie's the same. It's just camera footage of, like, a ghost, something like haunting these people in each movie. But the thing I have a problem with the paranormal movies is that they're just boring. They're just incredibly, like, I understand slow burns. I do love slow burns in horror, but whenever you do it to where, like, 90% of the movie is just nothing happens on purpose. Like, I feel like that's kind of disrespectful, because it's like, there's nothing that is accomplished. It's like there's nothing that's accomplished by the end of it. And in every one of these movies, almost, it's just like the only thing that happens is at the very end. And some people love that. I just not a fan of it. So that's why Paranormal Activity is my least favorite out of all of them, because I feel like they're the least inventive out of any of these franchises that I talked about in this video. So it's really just up because they're just really forgettable. There's not anything that made me like find anything good about. I mean they have things about them that have their merit, sure, these films, but they're just really forgettable because they're exactly the same. I can't remember which one's which. Maybe I've watched them a lot more. I've seen them a couple times, but I feel like they're just really incredibly forgettable and, dare I say, brainless, but I love other horror movies that do the exact same thing, so I'm a hypocrite. So, but the Paranormal Activity, the sequels, are just not my cup of tea. I guess that's what I would say. So, that's my worst ranking. Thank you so much for watching. If anybody watched, tell me down below what your favorite, or what your, not your favorite, what your least favorite horror franchises are. So, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll do a video on the best horror franchises, also recommended by Derek from Derek's Horror Corner. So, thank you guys so much, and stay tuned for that video.